Today we have a special guest with us. He's been with us before. His name is Jim Emmons. He works for the City of Charlotte in the Engineering and Property Management Department. And the last time he was here, he shared with us about safety in the workplace. And he has so much good information that I decided to ask him to come back again to share some information about safety at home, because we spend a lot of time at our home too. Thank you for joining us again, Jim.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I know it's been a while since you've been here, but I want you to remind our viewers and tell our new viewers about your background.
I'd be happy to. Thank you. I earned my BS degree in Biological Sciences from Auburn University and my Master of Public Administration from Florida State University. And I've been in the environmental health and safety field for about 23 years total. The last 9 years, I've been the safety coordinator for City of Charlotte E&PM, which is Engineering and Property Management. And early on in my career, I got into environmental health, which I really enjoyed protecting the environment, but I moved on over into protecting workers and people because that was even more rewarding for me. So that's why I'm in safety today.
So in the previous show, we talked about safety at work. How important is safety at home?
Well, we did talk about how many injuries there are in the workplace. Well, even though that statistic was very high, believe it or not, most of the injuries that occur to people do occur at home. Like you say, we spend a lot of time at home, and plus the weekend projects and things that we do, a lot of people will work safely on the job, and then when they come home, all that can go out the window. They just think, oh, I can't get hurt at my own home, and then that's where injuries occur. So I'm glad you had me on to talk about this.
I know that safety at home covers a lot of areas if you think about your house. If you had to narrow it down to just a few, what would be the most important safety issues in the home?
You're right, Cynthia. There's an awful lot of different issues. I would say the main ones are slips, trips, and falls, which again is similar to that we had in the workplace. Also, there's chemical use and storage, fire safety and evacuation. Housekeeping sometimes can actually impact our safety around the house. Working outdoors in the yard or on the house, cooking inside and outside. Electrical safety issues, sometimes they can be an issue at home. So as you can tell, there's a lot of different things to be concerned about.
And also, I was just sitting here thinking while you were going over that list, entertaining friends in your home. Whether you invite them for a barbecue or cookout, or if you have a party inside your house. Share with us some safety tips for avoiding slips, trips, and falls in the home.
That's so huge, and as we all who have older parents know, falls in the home can be extremely important, very serious to protect against. But for all of us, that is one of the most common accidents and injuries in the house. It starts with having slip-resistant rugs, and for showers or bathtubs, having slip-resistant rubber mats or those little applique things that you see that go on the floor. Another thing that just shocked me recently that I found out is how many injuries, serious injuries, are caused by pets in the home. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it. Cats and dogs getting under your feet, running into a room or whatever and tripping you up. So that's one part of it. Another part is keeping things in your house in good repair. If you have the edge of a rug that's starting to peel up or something like that, you don't want to neglect it. It'll surprise you how it always seems to happen that sure enough you'll get your foot or your toe caught up in that loose part of a rug or something like that. Also, handrails, any stairwells that you have, make sure you have a handrail. That can be very important. If you have elderly people in your home, you want to make sure they have a good handrail type system for getting into a bathtub or a shower. Those are some of the main things. And then the last thing is, like we said in the workplace, simply if there's any kind of spill or anything in the floor, clean it up immediately. Don't let yourself get distracted and figure, oh, I'll come back to that. Because sure enough, then later the phone will ring and you're dashing over for the phone. You can hit your own spill that you forgot to clean up. So
you had mentioned that the elderly earlier. Let's touch on children in the home, because they too tend to be accident prone. What are some things parents can do, or people watching little children can do, to make sure that they're safe from slips, trips, and falls?
Thanks for bringing that up, Cynthia. I know this is going to sound funny, and some of my younger viewers out there that are watching us on this show today are going to maybe say, oh, even Safety Man's saying that to me, but it's about keeping your toys picked up. That's one of the big areas for both adults and children, because even though us adults cannot expect a toy to be left someplace, kids will come back into the room themselves, children. So really keeping their room and their play areas neat, keeping things picked up is huge. It's amazing how just the smallest little ball, if you don't see it and you hit it with your foot, you can go down hard. So those are some of the main things. Later, we'll talk about some of the other things like chemical storage and stuff like that with children too when we get to that point.
And another point I want to bring out before we leave slips, trips, and falls is that the importance of having a gate if you have stairs in your home. Let's touch on that, Jim.
That's a great point. Anytime you have children in the home, you always want to have a gate for any change of elevation. Even if it just seems like a short set of steps, quite serious accidents can occur there. So you're exactly right. Putting some type of gate up, and also just keeping good attention to what they're doing and that kind of thing.
Yes, with little kids around, you almost have to have eyes in the back of your heads, huh?
You really do. You really do. And like we've even seen in some kind of comedy movies, which it looks funny in the movie, but in real life it's not so funny, and that is that children leaving toys on the stairs. Now we talk about just leaving toys in general can be a slip hazard, but on the stairwell, and then they always show the actor go flying down, you know, so we definitely want to be careful of those things.
Let's move on to a different topic. Let's talk about chemicals around the home.
Chemicals are huge. And there's a whole bunch of tips that I have for our viewers on chemical safety. The first thing is, as soon as you bring the chemical into the home, go ahead and read the label carefully. Find out what the hazards are. It'll even talk about on the label what not to store it near. In case there was a leak, it could cause a fire, a certain chemical, even just cleaning compounds. Find out what you need to wear to protect yourself when you use it. Some are eye irritants. Some are lung and throat irritants, and then they only want you to use those in a well-ventilated area. Skin irritants, eye irritants, all different kinds of hazards with some of our even most basic chemicals that we just use around the house. So read the label carefully. Also, you hear in the workplace that they talk about material safety data sheets, MSDSs, where they tell about first aid and different things you can do if you do become exposed to that chemical. Well, homeowners are starting to demand those material safety data sheets a little bit more too.
That's good.
I think it's great, because if you ever did get something ingested, you had a child that got into something, hopefully with good storage practices you wouldn't, but if you did, there are some chemicals, for example, and I'm sorry for the graphicness of this, but they want you to induce vomiting. Other chemicals ingested, they absolutely do not want you to, because it can cause even more damage. That's an example that if you didn't have the material safety data sheet talking about the first aid, or on the label, that you might not know. So that's extremely important. Read the label, look at the material safety data sheet. The next thing is, of course, like I say, whether it's wearing the rubber gloves or the eye protection, because you know some of the chemicals we use to clean, especially like in the bathroom, that pretty strong chemical, some of that bleach and that kind of thing, and if you're scrubbing, it can splash up into your eye.
That's true.
And you talk about some serious burns there. So having the proper PPE, personal protective equipment.
Uh-huh.
And then again, if you have anything again that's flammable, it seems like we see this in the workplace, but again, homeowners are starting to move towards safety a little bit more too. They're buying small flammable storage cabinets to go ahead and keep those chemicals in there. Then that will really help you towards your fire safety. It's kind of funny, a lot of these things in the home, whether it be housekeeping or chemical safety or fire safety, we'll see as we talk, a lot of times they're really tied together.
Tell me, are there some chemicals that we shouldn't mix together when we're cleaning, like a bathroom, that may be hazardous to our health?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, they're starting to find more and more that household bleach, chlorine bleach, mixed with ammonia, and which are two common ingredients on a lot of household cleaners. They'll be scrubbing, a homeowner will be scrubbing one thing with bleach and then come behind it and be scrubbing in another area. And ammonia and bleach can cause quite a toxic vapor to be given off. It can seriously hurt your lungs, and it's very toxic. It can cause some bad medical problems for you. There's other different interactions with some household cleaning chemicals. You really want to read those labels carefully, but that's one that immediately comes to mind because people have been having some serious problems with that.
So the key is to make sure you read the labels, even if it's something you buy on a regular basis.
That's right.
To make sure that you understand what you can and cannot use with that particular cleaner.
That's a great point. And sometimes you may simply change brands and you think you're getting about the same chemical, but it's simply another brand might have a different chemical in it that wouldn't react well, whereas the one you were using was okay. So yeah, always read.
You had mentioned earlier too that some chemicals cause fires in the home. What are some fire prevention tips that you can share with our viewers?
There's a whole host of fire prevention tips, and I think again the housekeeping can be extremely important, because if we get too many old newspapers scattered around, paper, things that can catch on fire very quickly, you want to be careful with that. The other thing is having things stored properly. You don't want to have two things that are pretty flammable together or stored near a heat source. A lot of times we keep some of those chemicals very close to where there's a stove or an oven because it's all in the kitchen area. So you want to be careful with that. Other heat prevention tips and fire prevention tips, if you will, the obvious, but it never hurts to go over it again, is smoke detectors. CO detectors, which is something else, incomplete combustion of fuels in the home. Sometimes when our power goes out, you always hear these sad stories about people that'll try to bring some kind of outdoor cooking thing inside in their desperation to get warm, and then it causes a CO2 problem in there. So a CO problem, excuse me, carbon monoxide. So have your alarms, keep good batteries in them. I like to have fire extinguishers available. Sometimes, luckily it's never happened in our home, but sometimes a little fire can start up. It can be something as small as a little outlet at the receptacle, the electrical receptacle. If you've overloaded it or there's some problem with a tool that you've got plugged in, it can arc or spark in there a little bit. Having a fire extinguisher handy could really save it as maybe a small thing from getting into a big, serious fire.
And how should people store gasoline? While we were talking about fire safety, I just thought of gasoline. A lot of people use that to cut their yards with their lawnmowers. How should they store that?
You're so right. If at all possible, I like to see them put that in a flammable storage cabinet, because those cabinets really, they can really keep anything from happening fire-wise. If you don't have a flammable storage cabinet, you definitely want to store it in a shed or a garage, someplace away from the home, and keep it away from heat sources. You don't want to store it if the hot water heater is out in the garage, say, don't have the gasoline stored right near there. Any heat sources at all. Also, oily rags, anything that you use like that. Some people use for varnish or paints, that kind of thing. You don't want to have that stored near it. So really, as much as you can isolate those, and of course having them in a gasoline safe can. You don't want to, if you transfer to another unapproved or unattended carton, for example, that in itself can be quite dangerous. So keep it in the gas can that's specifically built for that purpose.
And what about if there is a fire in your home? And I think that would be the worst thing to have to deal with. What about evacuating the home? Should you practice doing that if you're in a family, or what should you do?
Again, very perceptive. You're right on the money, Cynthia. Evacuation plans, a lot of people practice them at work. And they have fire teams and they do fire drills and all that. Well, shoot, chances are that in the home, if you've never even thought about that, I've heard really scary stories where people talk about when their own homes that they've lived in for a long time, when they fill with smoke, combined with a little bit of panic that you feel, they've gotten disoriented and turned around even in their own homes.
Oh, no.
So knowing what to do. For example, you often hear, get down low.
Right.
And because you can sometimes get down below the smoke level, practice your emergency evacuation route. Have your children very accustomed and aware. As corny as it sounds, maybe it sounds like safety man's getting too carried away here. Practice the occasional drill. It'll go a long way towards helping keep you safe. Once you practice your drill, if you're in a 2-story house, for example, you definitely want to think about, some people have these emergency ladders near their windows, or at the very least, think about having a contingency plan as to if you got trapped upstairs. Hopefully you never would. But those are the types of things. We've heard in the news a lot here lately. People love candles. Candles have gotten so popular over the years.
I like them too.
We do too at my house as well. But all you have to do is literally go to bed and forget one candle, and it can have some really catastrophic results. So be careful with your candles. Anything that you do decorative like that, you just need to be real alert for that.
Let's talk about performing yard work outside. What are some safety tips for our viewers for performing yard work outside?
I'm glad you asked. That's near and dear to my heart. I take care of my yard, and there's things that I do. And the very first step is important. Walk the yard. Go ahead. If something hard has stones or limbs or whatever during a storm has kind of come down into your yard that wasn't there the last time you mowed your grass or did work, never hurts to do a quick walk around to make sure that nothing's come in. A kid hadn't accidentally tossed a bottle over or something that you could hit and then be quite dangerous. Make sure there's no fire ant mounds that have been built, or ground hornets, as they call them, nests. That walk through will help you a little bit there. Doesn't take long. The next thing is always wear eye protection.
Okay.
I can't tell you the number of stories that I've read, and even had some coworkers with some close calls, that they're weed eating or mowing and they forget to wear their safety glasses, and they've gotten hit by something thrown up at a real high speed, and luckily in our coworker's case it didn't hit right on the eye, but now they all wear the clear safety glasses like I mentioned in our first show. Ear protection, weed eaters and blowers and mowers, those kinds of things, even though the exposure, you might only be out there for an hour or two, go ahead and save your ears. I'd put in some earplugs. Those are some pretty loud sounds out there. Last but not least, foot protection. That's key. A lot of times in the heat, they'll wear sandals or something like that, and
I've seen that too.
Yes, that's really dangerous. It only takes a moment for you to accidentally get distracted, and you could do some serious damage to your feet, or again, something thrown out on your bare foot. So that's never good. Always wear good shoes whenever you do yard work like that. Ladder safety is a huge one. One of my top tips for ladder safety, if you're doing work outside the house, always make sure someone else is home, and if possible, out there with you. Some of the saddest cases that I've heard of are when somebody was just going to do something real quick on the roof, and they were home alone, and they fell, and nobody was there to help them out. If possible, have somebody hold the ladder for you. But as corny as this kind of sounds too, whenever you get a new piece of yard equipment, go ahead and read that manual. I know we all tend to take that manual and set it aside and say, I know how to use a weed eater or a mower, but go ahead and read it. It doesn't hurt.
Or a hedge trimmer, and then you end up cutting the cord, because I've done that before.
Exactly.
So you have to be careful whenever you use any of that equipment.
You are so right.
So tell us, Jim, whenever you're entertaining people, and I'm sure that your safety tips would vary from home to home, and you have, let's say, a pool at your house. What are some safety tips around a swimming pool if you have a pool at your house and you're entertaining guests at a pool party?
There's a lot of tips surrounding that. Is number one, first and foremost, of course, you're required to have a fence around your pool so that hopefully nobody, other children, neighbor children, or whatever, can't get into your pool, especially not easily. When you're having a pool party and there's adults and children, not to sound, preaching or judgmental, but be real careful with alcohol, because that's when parents get partying, they get distracted, they can't keep their eye on what's going on in the pool. It's a lot of times too, a little kid whose older siblings can swim gets excited and might try to jump in and not realize. Also, going along with the pool parties, grilling out, I always like to add those tips. Never leave your grill, whether gas or charcoal, unattended, even for a split second. Because any children could come up, not really realize what it is or whatever, and reach up and pull it over, or they're playing, they can knock it over. When the adult is out there grilling, if he or she has to go inside, have another adult there before you leave to watch over the grill. So attentiveness, keeping focused, know what's going on. Those are the big things for pool and grilling outside.
Another thing that's become very popular over Thanksgiving, people are frying their turkeys now. Can you give us some safety tips on that?
Definitely. Some of the worst ones that we've heard are actual explosions. Not trying to be funny, but can you imagine an exploding turkey? Body parts, legs flying all over the place, and it's just one of those things that's unbelievable.
It sounds like something you see on a cartoon.
It is. It sounds like out of a comedy movie, exploding turkey. But actually what does that is when they think, I don't want to thaw it out, this big turkey. I don't want to take the time to put it in the refrigerator and thaw it out slowly over the days. I'm putting it in hot grease.
Frozen?
That's what happens. It's the frozen.
Oh, come
they
on.
think that, it's going to cook it because this is so hot. Or partially frozen. They tried to take a shortcut. They didn't do it where it was fully thawed. They put that frozen turkey in there, and that differential in that frozen and the heat, that hot grease, it just explodes.
Really?
It does, and so you got to be real careful with that. The main thing there is, again, keep your full attention on that hot grease. That's a dangerous thing. Never put a frozen turkey in there. And then along those same lines, while we're talking about grease and explosions, never, if you ever have a grease fire in your home from cooking, you never want to throw water on it. Our instant instinct is always, when you see a little fire starting, is to grab a container of water and throw on it. But if you've ever seen, and I don't know, they're out there on some websites, the devastating results of somebody throwing water on a grease fire, it explodes again into a big fireball.
And it explodes on you if you're standing close enough to it?
Absolutely.
Oh, really?
And the other thing is, even using a fire extinguisher that's meant for in the kitchen, if you actually have a pan of grease that's caught on fire and you go to spray that, it can shoot the hot grease out all over and maybe start even other fires.
Oh.
So the way you want to put out an actual grease fire is get a towel, soak it in cold water, wring it out to where it's wet. It won't burn, but you're not putting water on the fire. Then toss that damp towel over that pan or pot, and that'll smother the fire, and because it's wet, you've just wet it, it won't catch on fire. Turn off, of course, turn off the burner, and then that should take care of it. It's okay to use the kitchen fire extinguishers for fires when it's not actually the grease that's caught on fire. If something on the burner's caught on fire, something below the pot or pan, or say it's something that's you've let all the water go out of the steamer and it's not necessarily grease, then those fire extinguishers for the kitchen are fine. But those are some things to think about.
Before we leave, I want you to go over some safety tips in your garage or exercise room, because a lot of more homes, we're finding people have garages and they're building their own exercise rooms in order to stay fit. What are some things they can do in their garage to keep safe?
Well, again, in garages, that's where a lot of times we will store gasoline, kerosene, different things like that, that while they're not a problem for our home, they do get into the atmosphere a little bit. If you are trying to exercise out in the garage, those fumes can be very difficult on you. Garages can be a good place to work out, but have it well ventilated in there. That's very important. The other thing that is extremely important is be careful of the heat. Your body needs time to acclimate, and if you're having a really rigorous workout outside in the garage, the heat stress issues can really sneak up on you. We like fitness, and you know, wellness is a very important part of staying healthy, but in a garage, that's real important. In an exercise room upstairs that you might have in your house, again, like so many things, I'm not saying you can't exercise while you're at home alone, because some people are single and that might be their only choice. But it is one of those things that be a little careful. Well, I've read cases where people have put real heavy weight on equipment or something and tried to lift it, thought they could do it, and they were home alone and got pinned under it, that kind of thing. So it's just kind of keeping those types of things in mind.
So your main point, Jim, is just to be safe, not just at work, but at home too, especially at home, because you have accidents at home, and because you're so relaxed, because that is where you live. And I want to thank you for joining us too. You shared so much information with us. And I'm going to post this information on my website, www.abetteryouthshow.com. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Appreciate it.
Thank you.